married in July the 6th. We're having our 21st anniversary. And 6 weeks later, we moved to the mission field. In fact, we had to hurry our wedding up so we could get to the next slot in language school. And I remember in that language school, we would take turns once a month leading devotions in the morning. And it was 3 minutes long, and I would freak out. I literally freak out. I was like, I can't do that. And the crazy thing is, I was becoming a missionary, and I never preached before. I'd only taught Sunday school, and we started Bible study at the Pike House in Auburn. But nowadays, I have a problem is that I talk really long. So y'all just tell me, hey, in fact, if my wife was here, she'd just give me the sign. It's like, I'm going to kill you, or it means time to cut it off. But especially in Latin America, I had this instance about 18 years ago or something. I was preaching in a church in Cuba, and it was the end of a 14-day period that I preached at least once every day, and I was done. I was exhausted, you know. And so I had like a 25-minute sermon, and that was it. And when I was finished, the pastor said, "Is that it?" I said, "Yeah." It was kind of humiliating. You know? So because of that, I learned to, you know, they think if you don't preach an hour, you haven't preached anything. So you just have to bear with me, please. I'll try to make this concise. But I did want to start off by saying something. How many of you guys would... and I think this is the desire of every believer, everyone that loves God, is to know what God's will is for your life. You know, that's probably the greatest pursuit that we have as believers. And I can tell you it's really easy. It's a lot easier than you think. And it's in 1 Thessalonians 5:16, 17, and 18. It says, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for that is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." And one of the greatest pursuits that I've had as a believer is to give thanks at all times. And when you give thanks in every situation, you know, you can actually even give thanks when the devil attacks you. Thank God for it. You know what happens? It totally renders the enemy powerless against you. You know, every circumstance, every situation. I've had a great opportunity to do that recently with my daughter getting married. It was interesting because she was going to get married on a Saturday. It's an outside wedding. The next door neighbor decided that they're going to have a wedding the same day. And they tried every way they could to convince the person, please just do it a different day, whatever, you know. And they couldn't convince them, so they decided to have the wedding on a Friday instead. And it turns out we were in Northern California, right before you get to the mountains in Northern California. And it's one of the hottest places in California, except for Palm Springs. And it was 100 degrees that day. It's a dry heat, 20% humidity. It's actually, I was more comfortable than I am now. Yeah. But so we had the wedding. It was awesome. I had to wear a suit and a tie, which I'm kind of allergic to ties. and I still made it through. And my wife was amazed I could keep the coat on for an hour. And the next day it was 106. So as we were cleaning up the next morning for the wedding, they were setting up for theirs, and they were boiling. And once again, I just saw the providence of God. That really, I'm serious. If I could just, there's so much to say in such a little bit of time, but I can just tell you time after time how something happened that I really didn't want to happen, and it ultimately turned out so much better for me than I could have thought. Missing flights, or getting, kicked off a flight, or, thing after thing that you just say, God, I just thank you for this. I thank you for that. And I just thank God for each one of you guys. You know, it's a rare thing. As I was telling some people about our reunion this week, that we were actually going to have a prayer breakfast at our reunion. They said, "What?" I mean, these are Christians that never heard of that before, and I thank Kim for thinking of that, and you guys for being here. And I thank each one of you guys for just being a part of my life, because what happened here, and I'll say this too, my wife grew up in Atlanta. I know none of her friends. None of them keep in touch. And my wife was like vice president of her class and stuff like that. In Atlanta, they just spread out and they're gone. You don't ever see each other anymore. And some of you guys, I don't know how many of you guys, but I started Vestavia in first grade. And then all the way through, and then to come home and see you guys again here, it's just an amazing thing. And so I just thank God for you guys. I thank God for this place, this city, how it formed each one of us. I had an experience about 8 or 10 years ago. I've been working in Cuba for 19 years, and I usually have to go through a third country to get there. Up until recently, it was kind of difficult to fly direct, and there's like 20 or 30 flights a week into Cuba directly from the United States now, if you don't know. But a lot of things are rapidly changing. But that time, I had to fly through Nassau and the Bahamas to get there. So I'd fly over to Nassau, and then I'd get on the Cubana Airlines flight over to Havana. And as I was waiting in the waiting room to get on this flight, I saw some Hispanic men being led around by the Bahamian immigration officials, and I was just watching. What's going on there? I wonder what's happening, you know. And they were nervous. These men were nervous, and they were being led around. And then next thing I know, I'm on the plane. I'm sitting next to one of those guys. And so I began to speak to him, and he was a Dominican who had traveled through Haiti to Cuba to go to the Bahamas, hoping to sneak into the United States, looking for a better life. Literally, that's all he was doing, is looking for a better life. You know, once you get to know the Hispanics and the immigrants and all, you soften a lot on immigration policy. I'm a staunch conservative, but I have a soft place in my heart for the Hispanics. You know? And I began to talk to the guy. He was just nervous, almost trembling and stuff. And he explained to me, and I know the case because I have many friends that are immigrants, and probably sold everything he had to go into Haiti, to get over to Cuba, to get on this flight, and all to get that close and be turned back. And they were deporting him back to Cuba, and who knows how he's going to get back home, have nothing left when he got there. And I was just sitting there, and I said, God, why? Why do I have so much? Why am I who I am? Why was I born where I was born? Why did I grow up in a family where I did? And the Lord said to me, He says, it doesn't matter, but what matters is what you do with what you've been given. You know, what you do with what God has entrusted to you. And from that day forward, it's hard to ever complain. It's hard to ever wish for something better. You know, most of my best friends live outside the United States. They live in Bogota. They live in Lima, Peru, in Tarapoto, Peru, in northern Iraq, in Jordan, in Amman. Those are my best friends, and most of them live with very low standard of living. I was telling David before, one of my best friends in the world, he's this little Peruvian guy. He weighs about 120 pounds. And he called me yesterday. He called me from the Peruvian jungle yesterday on my cell phone. It's amazing. It's amazing how well you can communicate today. And he was just telling me, you know, the things that were happening there. We're planning some trips down there. And the guy lives in a house that's literally bamboo with mud caked on it and painted white, you know, with a dirt floor, no inside plumbing in his house. He has a little toilet that sits between two buildings, and it doesn't even flush. You just have to get a bucket and flush it. And there's no privacy there. You know, it's the craziest thing. And then he and his family shower in this little shower that is no more than some lines strung up with old pieces of plastic that gives you a little bit of privacy in the spigot. No hot water, nothing. He doesn't even know what that is. You know, and those are my friends. We bought him a motorcycle a couple years ago, and he just preaches. He goes from town to town. And then he was telling me back in September, he said, you know, there's so many villages around here that we can't reach, and because we don't have the resource. We can't even pay for the gasoline to get there. And if we win people to the Lord, we don't have Bibles to give to them. And I said, I got to do something about that. I got to do something about that. You know, I have 10 Bibles in my house, and I got 3 laptops, and I got an iPad or whatever, and I got to do something about that. So I just began to pray, and then about a week later, one of my best friends who's a wealthy developer in Destin calls me, and he's so frustrated because his church just wants more and more money, and they don't do anything with it. And I said, well, if you want to do something that'll really reach somebody, I can get you hooked up to some really good projects. And so because of him, we bought this guy a 7.5 acre cacao plantation up in the mountains, in the jungle mountains of Peru. The same property that 15 years ago was used to grow coca plants. And now with alternative crops, they're growing coffee and cacao. And so this guy couldn't even afford that, so I bought it. And in January, we signed all the papers, and he's growing cacao. And he was so excited the other day because they had their first cacao. Cacao is what you make chocolate with.
Thank you.
I think it's called, we call it cocoa, but it's cacao. And he was so excited because they had 15 kilos of cacao that they harvested. And I was hoping he'd go like put a floor in his house. He said, no, we're going to buy another piece of property for another church, you know. And then he was so excited yesterday when he told me, because after we bought that, he knows how to take care of bees. So we bought like 10 hives of bees, and he said, I was so excited. We harvested 15 kilos of honey. That's 150 soles, which is about $50. And he was so excited because now they're going to be able to travel and evangelize another village, you know. And you know, we don't really realize what we have until we see what other people don't have. And it's such an amazing privilege to be born here, to have grown up here, to have the education that we have. I think actually the education we had was greater than you know, a gifted education today. I've watched my own sons that have been gifted in AP classes, and really what they're learning today is what we learned just normal classes in our day. You know? And there's so much privileges to be in here. But I just want to tell you quickly my story. If you were to ask me when I was in high school if I was a Christian, I would have said yes. Some of you guys knew me well enough to say, "Are you kidding me?" You know, but I would read my Bible. I didn't necessarily attend a lot of youth ministries, but I had a faith. It just was inside, and you know, I didn't have anybody to lead me. I didn't have anybody to show me how to live. I was just trying to do it on my own, and kind of came from a dysfunctional, broken family. And so I literally had one foot in God's kingdom, one foot in the world. And that's a really terrible place to be. You know that verse in Revelations 3 that says, I wish that you were hot or cold, because you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. I don't think that's so much about the rejection of God to us as much as, hey, that's just not a good place to be. It's so much better. It's actually better to actually be cold than lukewarm, because then you'll know what you're missing. But when you're lukewarm, you just have enough to be comfortable. And so that's where I lived. And I remember when I graduated from high school, I don't know why, but I remember so well, I had this just cry in my heart. It was like, it's time to get wild. Really, it was time to get wild. So, you know, Danny and I were roommates our freshman year in college, and we got wild. We got wild. And it was the most miserable year of my life. It literally was. One of the problems is that my grandparents had helped start a church between Childersburg and Sylacauga when I was in high school. And on the way to Auburn, I decided to stop by and see their pastor, who had a bicycle that he was offering to sell me. I needed a bicycle at school. So the problem was I had a bag of pot underneath my seat that I'd just grown that summer. And I was so happy because I'd harvested it. It was just going to keep me going for the first couple weeks there, you know. And so the...
Getting a little hot.
It's time for me to pray now, Tom.
There's a redemption to all of this. So I go and look at his bike. Then he follows me back to my car, and I'm like, get under there a little bit. And he's prayed this crazy prayer. He said, God, will you just put a hook in his jaw? Will you grab a hold of him? That doesn't matter what he wants to do to get away from you. He'll never be able to get away from you. And it ruined my freshman year.
He prayed that out loud?
Yeah, he prayed that, literally. And I still know the man today. He's just a great man of God. And I really think he marked me. And we don't realize sometimes the power of our prayers.
You use that on somebody else now?
Oh yeah, I did it on my son.